Finally, in this group of 10 chapter authors to our book is Taryn Lane, and Taryn received a Churchill Fellowship in 2016 to visit European towns that were transitioning to 100% renewable energy, and sought to learn from their experience in Germany, Denmark, Austria, Sweden and the UK, and she is based in Hepburn Springs in Victoria. So again, a topical matter. Taryn.
Great, thanks everyone. So I've managed the first community-owned wind farm in Australia, Hepburn Wind, for over 11 years now, and we're owned by 2,000 community members. Every year we generate enough electricity to offset the towns of Daylesford and Hepburn Springs, and we are still the first and still the only example of a zero net energy town in Australia. And we've got a vision to be the first zero net emissions shire in Australia by 2030. Since we were built in 2011, there's now 100 community energy groups actively working on projects for the benefit of their communities. These groups are perfectly positioned alongside local governments to really lead broader action on climate change from the bottom up. But this must be combined with top-down supportive policies from the federal and state governments in order to harness this potential and to make real the global target of net zero by 2050. In 2016, as David mentioned, I was lucky to be awarded a Churchill Fellowship. My project was to look at 100% renewable villages and what were the replicable and scalable factors of these transitions. What I learnt there led me to understand that for Australian communities to be at the forefront of climate action, we actually have to go beyond energy and look for place-based solutions to community-wide net zero. So this means also looking at the sectors of agriculture, transport, waste and land use. When I returned from my Churchill Fellowship, I secured seed funding to develop an open source template for how communities could reach zero net emissions, and started with my community. So we were able to develop a master plan to reach zero net by 2030, which is the science-derived target that we need to stay within a safe climate and within 1.5 degrees of warming. There are now communities around Australia that are replicating and enhancing the model. So it's time for governments to go beyond ad hoc support for communities and use clear policy mechanisms to enable the scaling up of community-led transitions. We need an in-time transition to net zero, and communities need the federal government to show leadership, particularly after the bushfire season of last year, and now the ability to build back better through the pandemic. The pathways for the federal government to be able to stimulate this local leadership are to firstly initiate a zero carbon lighthouse community stimulus package. So every year select 15 leading communities and support them to develop master plans and implement projects to reach zero net emissions. And to accompany this, create a community energy target and a feed-in tariff to stimulate mid-scale community energy. So we're seeing lots of rooftop solar projects on houses and businesses. We're seeing lots of large-scale renewables. The big gap is the mid-scale market, where you can provide, greater bushfire resilience for communities, as well as, economic and energy security for communities if you fill up the distribution and low voltage network. One of the key conclusions of the Royal Commission into bushfires is that the locked-in impacts of climate change are already setting an elevated risk for the next 20 years. So supporting communities to lead their transition to net zero is helping communities deal with the impacts that are already there, and they can build resilience and adaptation to that. It is supporting them to take responsibility for their patch and to find place-based solutions. It's enabling hard conversations about the task ahead of reducing agricultural, transport and waste emissions. It's enabling caring and connection to country to occur. To reach net zero, it will take an all-in approach across government, communities and sectors. Thanks.